Chalkbrood is a fungal disease that kills the brood stages of development in the honeybee colony. It's caused by the fungus Ascosphaera apis. So what happens is developing larvae will consume fungal spores from Ascosphaera apis. Those spores will go to the midgut of the developing larvae and begin to germinate. They will produce mycelium, which are these cottony-like threads that are the vegetative state of the fungus in the midgut of that developing larvae. They compete with the larvae for food. So essentially the larvae starve to death. So then the mycelia of Ascosphaera apis burst out of the walls of the body of the larvae. They make that entire larva look cotton-like. They fill the entire cell with these fiber cottony-looking material. The fungal mycelium are white, so initially the infected individual will look white. But as those mycelium produce spores, the spores themselves are black, so the body and the infected area darkens over time from white to almost black. The infected larva almost looks yellow and orange initially, but as those mycelium grow out of it to fill the cell, it will become white, and then the whole thing will darken from gray to almost black. This dead individual is called the Chalkbrood mummy. And those mummies can be dispersed throughout the combs, and some beekeepers say that they have this characteristic rattle. If you pick up a comb that has these mummies in it and shake it lightly, you can hear those mummies shaking in the cell, causing that rattle. Worker honeybees are remarkably good at identifying larval individuals that are dying from this disease, and once they become these mummies, they will remove these mummies from the combs. So in a very light infection, you might see them interspersed throughout the brood. As that infection grows and the bees are having a harder and harder time keeping up with taking these things far from the nest, you might see piles of mummies at the bottom board of a hive. You might see them just outside the hive entrance, maybe on the landing board, but just outside the entrance, or you might see piles of mummies beginning to stack up on the ground outside the hive. Usually if you're seeing that, the infection is very high, lots of broods dying, lots of mummies are showing up in the cell. There are no chemical controls for Chalkbrood disease. I guess that's bad news and it's good news. The bad news is we can't just put one thing in there and clean it all up. But the good news is it means we don't have to put another chemical to our colonies. Chalkbrood is particularly frustrating to me because hygienic stocks of bees almost entirely control it. So if you have a hygienic stock in your colonies, you probably will never see Chalkbrood. If you don't have a hygienic stock in your colonies and the spores end up in the nest, then you can start having individuals that die from the disease. So one of the first recommendations is use hygienic stock. If you see the disease, requeen with hygienic stock so that you can have worker bees in that nest in the future that are capable of just keeping out at low levels these diseased individuals so that it doesn't spread within the nest. Some beekeepers feel it's necessary to take additional steps to control Chalkbrood. For example, they may rotate out those diseased combs. You can do that. You can replace the diseased combs with new combs that the bees can build comb on and the queen can lay eggs and you can have pollen and honey, etc. stored in those cells. However, when left alone, if you control everything else in the nest, varroa, small hive beetles, the things that you can control, colonies usually pull their way out of Chalkbrood. I've personally never seen a colony die to Chalkbrood. I've seen some heavily infected colonies with Chalkbrood, but requeening and taking this next step can help. What is that next step? Well, feeding the bees, providing some pollen nutrition or some sugar nutrition can help colonies recover from this infection. A lot of beekeepers try to take the approach of minimizing things that would promote Chalkbrood growth. What is Chalkbrood? Well, it's caused by a fungus. Well, how do fungi thrive? Well, they thrive usually in cool, damp climates. So you can try to change things around your nest so that the nest is not in a cool, damp climate. Don't keep your bee colonies in recessed areas, kind of at the bottom of hills that might trap cool, damp air. Maybe consider keeping them in the sunshine, ensuring adequate ventilation so this humidity is removed from the nest and doesn't promote the growth of Chalkbrood. Really, the best way to handle Chalkbrood in your colonies is to ensure that you have a good hygienic stock in that nest, that you're controlling all the diseases and pests that you're capable of controlling, varroa and these other things, and ensuring adequate nutrition, that they have ample stores of carbohydrates, that they have ample stores of pollen, or that a good nectar and pollen flow is happening. Collectively, these things typically help your colonies overcome Chalkbrood.